Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. In part 4 of my How to Create an Animated Batman Scene series, I want to show you how to take the buildings I created in the last video, UV unwrap those in Blender, and add cartoonish colors to them with the texture paint tools. In the next video, I'll show you how to lip sync Batman using a process I haven't shown in the past, which involves his mouth being on layers and then changing the opacity of those layers to create the lip sync. Before we get started, I want to thank our sponsor for today, Piggly Wiggly. Piggly Wiggly, for when you can't find a Kroger. All right, let's get started. So here I'm in Blender, and this is the end of the scene I created in the last video. So I've got my buildings and I've got my background. So I currently have all of my other objects aside from the buildings and the camera in their own collection. So that way, if I want to work on the buildings, I can just turn off this entire collection and everything's hidden. I'm also going to go ahead and turn off the eye icon next to building 2 so I can just look at building 1. So if you're new to UV unwrapping, what UV unwrapping is taking a model and breaking it down into a flat plane so then you can add an image to it and then paint on top of that image. UV unwrapping is kind of an art style of its own, and it can be very complicated depending on your model. Say if you have a human model or something that's not, symmetrical. But in this instance, since we're just dealing with a box model, I'm going to show you how to quickly unwrap this so we can texture paint on it. And you'll see what I mean when I get done. So I'm going to select the building. You can see it's selected with the orange outline. And up here at the top on the workspace, I'm going to click on plus, hover over General, and choose UV Editing. So now I have a 3D viewport on my right and a UV editor on my left. And you can see with my building selected, I have a UV map here. And this UV map was created when the cube was created. So Blender automatically assigned it one. And you can see if you unfolded a cube, this is what it would look like. It has 6 sides. So if you wanted to start painting on a cube, you already have that available. But this is how it looks before we made any changes. So now it doesn't represent the building accurately. So the first thing I want to do is click Alt-Z to go into X-ray mode so I can select the faces on the back and the front. I'm going to go to face mode by clicking this up here. So I'm going to left click and drag and select all those faces. So now to unwrap this, I'm going to click U while in the 3D viewport, and then I'll bring up my unwrap options. And I want to click on Smart UV Project. So this allows Blender to make the decisions for us. However, there is one thing I want to change. It's probably 0 if this is your first time bringing up this menu, but I've brought it up before, so mine is currently to 0.030. So click in there and change yours from 0 to 0.030. So what this is when it separates the model into blocks, and you'll see that when it unwraps it, this creates a little bit of margin around those blocks. So once you've changed that, click OK. And now you can see this more represents our model. So I'll click Alt-Z to come out of X-ray mode. And we'll scroll in, and if I highlight this block, now the problem is Blender is currently in a mode where it only shows you UVs when you've selected certain faces. So to change that in the UV editor, I'm going to go up here and click on this UV sync selection to turn it on, and now we can see all of our UVs whether we've selected the polygons or not. And when I say polygons, I mean that interchangeably with faces. Now you can see if I select this block, you can see those in the viewport. So that's how texture painting works. If we want to texture paint on this block, we can texture paint here in this viewport or on the model, and that's where the texture will show up. So I can't show you that now because I don't have anything to paint on. So now I'll click on the plus button up here again and add General Texture Paint. You see our model is purple, and that's because we don't currently have an image assigned to texture paint on. So to add that, in the Active Tool and Workspace Settings tab, I'm going to click on that. You see we currently have no texture, so I'm going to hit plus, base color, and I'll add the name Building 1 base color. Then I'm going to change the width and the height to 2048. And you may need to increase this depending on what size you want your image to be, but currently this will be fine for what I'm doing with it. So in base color, I'm going to click in there and change that to kind of a medium gray, and I'll click OK. So now you see our model is the color that I just selected, and it's no longer purple. So now if I wanted to paint on the model, I could. Let me change the radius of my brush down to about 14. So before I paint on this, I want to go to the Materials tab. Since this is going to be a cartoon type look, I want to change all the settings to 0 because I don't need any of those. So I'm going to go back to the active tool and workspace settings, click on that. I'm going to change my color to a pink and paint on these faces. And to make this a little easier to see, I'm going to go up here to the overlays and turn off floor and grid. And I'm also going to turn off these axes, so that looks a little cleaner. I can paint on the model, but you don't see that over here on the paint viewport. So I'm going to click on this icon here, which gives me a drop down, and I'm going to choose the building 1 base color to display it in this viewport. Scroll out and now you can see where I've painted on the model. Now in viewport shading, the colors don't look exact, but if I click on the viewport shading rendered option, now you can see those look the same. So this isn't how we're going to paint on the model though. So I'm going to undo this, and how I'm going to paint on the model is this is going to be very specific polygons are going to be colored. So I don't need to do it with a paintbrush. I'm actually going to do this with the fill tool. So the first thing I'm going to do is color the outside edges around the window. So to do that, I'm going to switch to edit mode. So with the polygon face mode selected, I want to click on select box, and I want to change this to select circle, and I'll bring the radius down quite a bit. So I'm going to scroll in, and then I want to select this corner and this corner's faces. Then I'm going to go to select similar, and select perimeter. And you see that gave me all the faces. So I'm going to do the same thing here, but I'm going to hold shift when I select these two, and then I'm going to hit select similar, perimeter. Now I've got both of those selected. And by doing that, it selected them all the way around. So that gives me what I need. So now to paint these, I'm going to go back into texture paint mode. And you see those polygons don't look selected now. I need to check this box, which is paint mask. And now you can see only the black parts are what's selected. So I'm going to click on the paint fill tool, and I'll click in here to change the color, and I've already picked out a color. So I'm going to change that to 94480A. And that's going to be a kind of a dark orange, because that'll be like the light is reflecting on those when I color the windows. So if I just click on once in this black area, it fills all of that with orange. And you can see on the UV map over here how all those are filled with orange. So I'll go back to edit mode, and in the windows I'm going to select a couple of these, and I'll click on select linked, flat linked faces. You can see I've got all those selected. I'm going to do the same thing here while holding shift, select linked flat faces, again here. And the last one. I'm not going to do the bottoms at the same time because I'm going to use a gradient for this, but I want the gradient length to be different on the windows. So if I go back to texture mode, in the active tool and workspace settings, I want to scroll down here to color, and I want to change from color to gradient. And then I want to click on the black tab and click in the black color swatch and change that to F1832A. I'm going to click on the white one and change it to F8ED91. Okay, there's our gradient color. So now with the fill tool still selected, I want to left click at the top and drag down to the bottom. And you can see that created our gradient windows, and you can see those in the UV editor. And it did all the way around. So I'm going to go back to edit mode. I'm going to deselect those. Now I'm going to select a couple in here. Go to select linked flat faces. Holding shift, I'm going to select a couple more here, linked flat faces. A couple more here. And then a couple here. Getting all those selected, I'm going to go back to texture paint mode. And now just the bottom ones are selected. So now using the same color, I'm going to left click and drag, but I'm going to come down about part way. Okay, I think that looks good. So that's the painting for this building. And if I go to render image, you can see what that looks like. So now you can see how the orange around the edges looks like they're being lit up by the windows. So I'm going to close that out. So I'm going to go back to edit mode, and I'm going to unselect building 1 and hide it. I'll select building 2 and turn it on. Then we'll go to object mode and select it, edit mode. Now I'm going to click here and change it to select box, and we'll hit Alt Z to go into X-ray mode and select all of these. So I'm going to bring up U to bring up the unwrap options, Smart UV project. I've still got my 0.03 in, hit OK. So now you can see that unwrapped here, but we've still got the other texture behind it. So I'll show you how to change that in a second. So I'm going to go to texture paint mode, and I'm going to click plus to add a texture, add base color, and I'm going to change that to building 2 base color. And we've still got 2048 listed as our width and height. And then I'm going to change the color to a lighter gray. And I'll click OK. Now we'll hit Alt Z to come out of X-ray mode. And then up here, this drop down, I want to change to building 2 base color. Now you can see we have the image texture for this one. So I'm going to go to edit mode. And I'm going to switch back to the circle select. Click in the viewport to deselect everything. Now I'm going to click each one of these while holding shift. I'm going to go back to texture mode. And I'm going to click up here to turn on my mask. And now you can see I only have the black selected. And if I go to gradient, you can see I still have the same gradient, and I'm going to use that. So I'm going to left click and drag, and I'm only going to come down about 1/3 of the way. Okay, now I'm going to go back to edit mode. Now with these still selected, I'll hit Control and plus on my numpad to increase my selection. I'm going to turn sideways so you can see it. Now you can see I've selected all of the edges around the windows. Now holding Control, I'm going to click each window to deselect it. So now I only have the outside perimeter of the window selected. So I'm going to go back to texture paint mode. And we'll go to color. And we'll use the same color that we had from the last one. And with the fill tool selected, I'm just going to click into there. And you can see all those changed. Now if I go to render, you can see what that looks like. So on this second building, I'm going to change the color of the underside of these ledges to make them darker to kind of give it a little more weight. So to do that, I'm going to go to edit mode. So I'm going to click in the viewport to deselect everything. Now I'm going to click on an edge between 2 polygons, which is kind of hard to see here. But I'm going to hold Alt while I do it. And you can see I selected that whole loop. So I'll hold Shift and Alt and click on one on the other side of the other ledge, and that gives me both loops. So now I'm going to go to texture paint mode, and I'm going to click in color, and we'll change that to a dark gray, just slightly darker than the building currently is. Then we'll click inside there, and you can see on my UV map that's changed to gray. Then we'll hit render again. You can see we've darkened that up just a little bit. It's subtle, but I think that improves the look of the building. So for these type of models, which is, simple cartoon type models, UV unwrapping can be fairly simple and texture painting can be easy using the fill tool and selections. So hopefully you found this video helpful. If so, please like and subscribe and watch the other videos in the series. In the next video, I'm going to show you how to lip sync with Batman, but it's going to be different than the previous videos I've done because I found a new method that I think will be quicker and easier to use. So keep on a lookout for that one, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.